Hello, and welcome to Everything Remade, a podcast that I hope is about growth as much as it is about music. I'm Edie Quinn, and we have a great show lined up for you today. Before we get started, though, I'd like to remind you that we have a Patreon page at patreon.com/humanmachine. You can go there for music sneak peeks, the latest issues of Sparks Magazine, and tons more. Patreon.com/humanmachine. And now, I'd like to play something for you. You're hearing Blood on Their Hands by Komarov, which comes off their debut LP, which we released on cassette earlier this year. I sat down to chat with my new pal Michael, who plays guitar in the band, and my old friend Loz, who plays drums.
My entry into music was, I think, maybe 13 or so. And my brother just got a bass for Christmas, and he was teaching me some songs. I think I started with Rage Against the Machine. So, like, I never had the intention of, like, picking up music to perform or anything like that. It was just sort of on a whim when we had some downtime. I was playing in bands when I was younger, but it was just like covers with my friends. It wasn't anything like, again, with the necessarily the express intent to perform. I think the shift in my music taste, and I think as a result, the shift in kind of what I wanted to do creatively was, I would say it started with kind of post-rock, things like that. I don't know, it felt like it was a development. There was something more meaningful to it, perhaps. I don't necessarily think the same now, looking back 10 years on it, but teenage me definitely thought that. The first thing I did was kind of release a little post-rock project with my friend. I guess that wasn't necessarily performing live, though. The shift into punk music, I guess, drove me a bit more towards that. So I think the journey was bands like Frafra, maybe. So taking the kind of the parts of post rock that I enjoyed and making it a bit more kind of acerbic and biting. And I thought, yeah, I can get into this. And then from there, it kind of led me into the screamo world. Some friends who posted Frafra initially, I started talking to them about it. I was like, this is really cool. Give me more things like this. And that was kind of my gateway into it. And I think as a result of that, I started to get into a bit more of like I would say the more authentic, the more kind of earnest side of music. And I wanted to get involved in that and just starting bands that way and getting involved in kind of local DIY scenes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, post-rock doesn't come up that much on here when we're just like, chatting or whatever, but I think it's sort of like really, there was something really big about like when you first hear that kind of stuff. Like it's cinematic in a way that a lot of other, genres or whatever are not, and really says like upon like someone's first impressions, it says like there's this like sort of wider world of instrumentation available, etc. And it's I play in a screamo band, and so you can take this with a grain of salt, but it's just like it. I think on reflection, sometimes you're like this. Yeah, like this didn't hold up as well for me specifically because it feels very similar after a time, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like you said, like Fall of Ifrafa, and it's like, yeah, that's like very visceral. Like that will capture your attention. That demands like a like it has an urgency and it demands an audience in a way that Explosions in the Sky doesn't. Explosions in the Sky is like very like I put that on honestly like when I want to read something, because it's very nice. It's like I don't know, like I'm reading comic books and Explosion in the Sky. It's like I've got the soundtrack to some kind of jungle adventure or whatever it is that I'm reading at the time. But yeah, you said that you just started like playing bass and learning songs, and then you'd be into like cover bands and stuff. And this is like your like teenage years and whatnot. So was your very first exposure to live music like the kinds of shows that Komarov would play now? Like, because you mentioned Fall of Everfell.
Right, yeah. I think that my first gig was a Pink Floyd tribute band at like the arena in my house with my parents, maybe like when I was 13 or so. So yeah, definitely like my concert going days were much bigger earlier on. I think when I was in school, the big thing was like the new wave of metalcore. So bands like Parkway Drive and Killswitch Engage and things like that. That was really what the big thing was in kind of like the alternative music that I listened to growing up. I think a lot of the other bands that I kind of were really into. So I don't know, Alice in Chains, things like that from my brother growing up in the 90s. But obviously they weren't really bands that I could see at the time. So I was seeing the things that were more current. I enjoyed those. I think, again, looking back on it now and with the reflection of hindsight, very similar to what we were saying before, it's probably not as much what I'm into these days. But yeah, I think that the kind of local shows that I started going to were way more eye-opening as to how it just felt a lot closer, a lot more intimate. There was a lot more kind of like community involvement. It was actually people putting it on. It wasn't kind of so many steps removed from you as an audience member. They were just kind of your friends. They were people that you knew. There were people that you'd see at other gigs doing music. And I think that's kind of what drew me to it. I wanted to get involved in that.
Mm-hmm. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in an incredibly middle-class town outside of Newcastle, so the northeast of England. I think it was maybe a 30-minute bus ride into the city for me, so like very easy to get to reasonably big shows. Like it was one of the kind of places that bands would play if they did a UK tour and things like that. So it was kind of accessible for me to see gigs.
Yeah. And like, was this, you mentioned, I know what it was like here during like some of the, these bands that you mentioned, like I know what it was like in high school or whatever, when some of this stuff was breaking, but like, what was it like there? Like Loz, like what were kids at your school listening to, like when you were just getting into this like crazy punk music or whatever?
Like most of my friends in school were like into like metal and stuff. So
right,
yeah, like some of the earliest gigs I went to when I was like a teenager were like Machine Head and like Slipknot and stuff like that.
Okay, but that's not that's not what's going on overall in the school.
Oh no, yeah, like, it was just like terrible pop music and shit like
that. Okay.
But yeah, we were like the weirdos who were listening to unpleasant stuff that no one else wanted to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, like I had a good friend at school that was like into like just like really open-minded, just like listening to all sorts of weird shit. Like he's listening to like the Amanda Garlis and stuff when he was like 15, and he introduced me to like I think I could kind of get into screamo through post rock as well, like Michael, where this friend Scott who like introduced me to like yeah, Godspeed You Black Emperor and Explosions in the Sky and, Do Make Safe Think and all those bands. And then, like I heard Envy and I was like, oh, this is like Screamo, but like some guy shouting over it. This is cool.
Yeah.
This is like metal and post rock all together. And then I was like, I thought all Screamo was like that. And then, delved like 1 degree deeper. And I was like, oh man, this is like so much broader. And like the post rock Screamo stuff like doesn't really appeal to me that much. But it was like sort of, that gateway. But yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I heard Envy before I heard any like Explosions of the Sky or stuff like that. So I had this weird backwards trajectory where it was like I got like I was spoiled, right? Because like it's like I feel like if I heard Explosion in the Sky or whatever, like first, I'd be like, I'd make that connection. I'd be like, what would be sick is if someone was screaming over this. But I already heard that, so it was like it was like backwards for me. It was like
this is lounge envy.
Yeah, this is yeah, exactly. This is like somebody didn't show up for practice and they were just like, nah, this is cool how it is. Let's just do it. Like they just really didn't like that vocalist, so they just went on without them. But yeah, like it's like I don't know how to like ask sometimes where it's just like what was going on in my high school when I was discovering like all these bands and stuff. Like it was just, I mean, this is a little before y'all and stuff, so it's like we're talking about like MC Hammer and Vanilla Ice, like, and it's really funny because like I will put on like a playlist with some of that horrible stuff now, and I'm like very entertained by it, in a really different way. But yeah, when we were over there with y'all a couple times, Loz, you'd play the UK garage channels and stuff, and so
oh yeah,
I and we have like culturally, like all we know about the like high school experience of like people from the UK or whatever is like from like films like that we see, right? And it's just like that can't be it. It's not all like just like extremely like wild like techno rave music like 24 hours, so I'm just like fascinated like what was really going on, and it's just like it's just like anything else, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I imagine like, kids at my school would probably listen to the same thing as kids in the US.
Yeah.
Like Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera and all that stuff.
Right.
But then like, when we were like teenagers, there was like this, like whole wave of like landfill indie stuff. So like, it's honest, like whenever we go on tour, like we don't actually listen to like any heavy music because we're all just sick of it by that point. So like, what you see in the van is like what we listen to.
Mm-hmm.
Like we'll listen to like the Cribs and the Rakes, and then just like loads of UK garage and just terrible stuff because no one wants to listen to like 2 hours of D beats anymore.
Yeah,
yeah.
You're gonna get it later. So
all day. Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
And also our tastes are like 10 degrees different, so it's impossible to enjoy the music the other people in the band like.
Oh yeah, like is that with Komarov specifically?
No, well, I think with everyone it's like, well, you like a very slightly different brand of screamo to me, so I'm not going to listen. We're not listening to that together.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like it is wild, like I sometimes I'm like, I don't even know like what Jason likes, right? Like we spend all this time together. We text back and forth like constantly, right? But like it's like you know, Jason will just randomly be like, The Cure is like the worst band in the world. And I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, what are you talking about? You know? And then, and we have a thing every year where, it's like pulling teeth to decide on what songs we're going to cover for like our Halloween cover thing, you know? And
Yeah.
he just sends me like once we start talking about it, right? Just like daily, he'll send me like 2 or 3 links, and I'm like, I do not know where this band came from or why you think this would be us. Like, what about the way that we play songs makes you think that I'm suited to do something like this? Like, this is so, like, it's something that I was just like, it'd be like, this song is good, but like, this is like a song, and what we do is like, if it's not dynamic, like I can't even do it because I'm not good at stuff, right? Like like it's like if you're really dynamic, you can not have to be that good because you're very dynamic. It's like why screamo people just fall on the floor and cry and stuff, right? Because it's like it's a distraction. You're just like, yeah, it's intense, you know. You're like, so you're like cheating on the like being able to play something that's captivating, you know.
Yeah,
I'm like,
I mean that's my drumming cheat code. It's like if I just do enough blast beats, no one will find out. Like I have like one fill.
And the fill is a blast beat. It's just on the one drum instead of
exactly. Yeah.
No, that's like my cheat for when I'm doing blasts and I'm getting tired. Is just like, okay, here's the fill. But it's like literally just the same thing. But I'm only on the drum and relying on the bounce back, you know, instead of
yeah. Like if I switch to just the snare now, no one's going to realize that it's getting sloppy.
Yeah. And you almost like you're like counting yourself back to the right, you know, tempo or whatever. But yeah, it is weird, like how, you know, a lot of genres, like they have done very well at like making all these like subgenres or whatever, you know, and every time like screamo tries to do it, it's like it just feels really weird, you know. So it's like you're saying like, yeah, we all like this very specific like whatever, and it's like, yeah, because like there's a lot of stuff that it's like I don't know what else you would call this. Like, yeah, this is screamo, but like this isn't necessarily like what I am super into. You know, like it's like they try to do it like oh, this is emo violence, and this is like scrams, you know, and this is like blackened screamo, you know, or like all this other stuff. And then what ends up happening is you just have bands that are just called all of those things. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like so they weren't really doing what you were trying to do, you know, like when you say black metal, you know that sound. You know, when you say metal, you know that sound. When you say new metal, you know that sound. But like just, you know, emo violence, it's like, okay, theoretically, I think I understand what band is supposed to be emo violence and what isn't. But then you have some band that self-describes as emo violence, and you're like, this is like mid-tempo, like I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. But
yeah, got you. I guess because it's like, maybe just because it's, you know, it's like a pretty specific genre already, isn't it? It's like, you know, made up of all these different things, and then if you try and break it down any more than that, it just gets like, a bit blurred.
Yeah, and also I just felt like it just was it was just a pissing contest a lot of the times. Like bands would be like, we're emo violence, and you're like, you sound just like these other bands. Like there's nothing about this that is what, or like one band would be like, we're blackened screamo, and you're like, you sound just like these other bands. Sounds like you just put something there so that, you sounded cooler or more mysterious, or whatever. But yeah, I don't know.
And it works, because that does sound cooler and more mysterious. So,
it sounds cooler. I mean, I'm waiting for that blackened emo violence, to like. Then it's just like, it's all gonna be over. I don't know. Like,
all bets are off.
I don't know. I just like to write songs. I don't care. I don't care what you call them. Half the time, I don't care if you listen to them. I don't even know. Like, I can't, like, listen, I can't check my email, right? It's just like, it's just like, I don't even know how many, it's like, is this record, do people like it? I don't know. Or did people buy it? I don't know. Then I'm shipping them and I'm like, wait, I'm out of them again. I guess people liked it. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know. Nobody can answer a phone call. Nobody can check their email. It's just like we're just inundated with like junk and spam and like, bots and bot plays and I don't know. It's good times.
Hell yeah, living in the golden age.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Like Komarov, like we didn't set up to be like, oh, we're going to be like this genre or this genre. Like we're going to rip off Battle of Wolf as much as we can and hope that no one notices.
Okay.
So, I think in the early days as well, it was Ari. It was like meant to be just simple and fast and harsh, and then it just kind of turned into we just end up writing what we write. I think it's the same. Elliot, the vocalist, and I kind of say the same thing when we write music together. It's like, it kind of doesn't matter what you set out to do, because you're always just going to end up like, you have certain things that you favor when you write music, and they just kind of naturally come out. I find it really difficult to depart from that sometimes, because I find it really difficult to write something that I'm not like, yeah, that sounds cool. Like it's just what your brain goes to, like how you fill in the blanks when you're writing a song.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just come up with those ideas, and they're what kind of sing to you.
Yeah, I said it before, but it's like I've tried before to I've just been like, oh, I want to do my take on X thing or whatever, and it never sounds like that. It's just like, and that project I did called Bitter Pill was a good example. Like if I'm like, oh, this is supposed to sound like this band Gas Huffer, and it doesn't. It's just like sounds like whatever, because
you just get carried away and just do something completely different.
Yeah, I mean, you can't help like when you're pressing down the cookies that you get your little fingerprints in them sometimes, and it's just it's fine, because ultimately that's what makes it sound different, right? Because like you're like we were just trying to rip off Battle of Wolf, and I almost think that you maybe described Katie that way once as well, but Katie and Komarov's like, as much as it's like you all share two members, it's like night and day almost, and like it's like you could have come from like each band being like, we're gonna rip off like this exact same band, but it didn't end up that way because like Michael was saying, like it doesn't matter necessarily what you set out to. It's like once you start filling in the blanks, and other people have their input as well, and the way that people's like tones like influence the sound, in the way like even the way like an engineer, who recorded the band like influences the sound and stuff like that. And then the next thing you know, you're like, oh, okay, this is nothing like what we set out for. And like usually it's like all the better for it. Sometimes you might listen to what you're hearing back and you're like, this doesn't sound like Battle of Wolf at all, that stinks, because like that's That's a
It's
very
not super
high.
interesting when you see a band that sets out to rip off another band and then does it really well. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not super interesting. It's like, yeah, you
yeah.
did too good a job of emulating that. You should have drank like 10 beers and made it stupider. That's the Komarov model.
Yeah, but I mean, even like it's wild to imagine like that it even would have held up. Like, say in the beginning of Komarov, when y'all, like back in 2016, when y'all were like, let's try this, right? Like, it's almost impossible to imagine with like everything that's happened in the world and like all of the sort of like every time, like the couple of times that y'all have tried to do like tours or whatnot and that got like shot out, that even if you were trying to rip off the exact same band, like it wouldn't sound like that anymore. It's just too much has happened, right? What was the sort of origin story of the band, like as far as like the first time when everybody said, hey, why don't we, like, we've all got other bands and stuff going on, but why don't we all try to make music together?
It was, I think I met Michael through like our first guitarist George, like because I used to like drive bands on tour for a living, and like went through Newcastle with some band that I was touring with, and recognised George from Crimea River Festival, but like we'd never actually spoken or anything. But I was like, hey, you went to Crimea River, right? And then we just got chatting and realised that we had like the exact same like taste in music basically, and yeah, then like he was like, oh, do you want to start a band with me and my friend Michael? And we did, and then that was it pretty much, right?
Yeah, I George was the person who introduced me to Fall Forever and was my gateway into screamo as well. So he was like, "Oh, you like that, do you? Try this, try this, try this." I think he threw me in at the deep end with like June Pyack and stuff, which was such a departure from anything that I'd heard previously. And like I couldn't even say that I liked it at first. I was like, this is really different and really cool, but I need some time to process this. And then it kind of slowly grew from there. I was like, actually, I really fucking like this. Yeah, we ended up living together in Newcastle, and it was the same. We just had a practice. So George and I were in a different band, but we wanted to start doing something a bit more kind of simple and aggressive. I think the other band that we were in with Elliot as well was a bit more kind of cerebral, like 10-minute songs, post-metally inspired. Very kind of like Alerta, Antifascista records, like Downfall of Gaia and bands like that. Not as good, but that was where we started. So the departure from that into doing something way more straightforward and way more simple was really appealing.
Yeah, it's when you said like I wasn't even sure if I liked it at first, it reminded me like basically the first screamo show that I ever went to, and like this is like like there just wasn't, this didn't exist yet, right, as we all know it now. And so like I just think I'm going to a punk show, and I went with a friend of mine at the time, and like his favorite band stuff like Face to Face or whatever, you know, and he hated it. He was like, "What is this?" And I remember like I didn't really know what I was seeing. I didn't know, but I remember like just like yesterday, like just like I remember like the hairs on my arms were like electric. Like I was like, whatever I'm seeing, like this is it. Like I can't, like I couldn't follow the music. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't follow it at all. But I was like goosebumps. I was like, this is it. And like I don't know, I've talked about that before where it's like I always had trouble not making my voice like not crack and sort of go into that screaming, and that was like it gave me permission. It was like, hey, you don't have to try that anymore. You're allowed to just like do that, right? And so it was like this really it was very liberating, you know. It like gave me permission to step fully into what I was subconsciously trying to do anyway. And I think that carries over into like a lot of people's experience when they go to their first show, like as we know it, you know, their first like DIY show, where it's just like, you know, Michael, like you mentioned before, like how those barriers, you know, between the audience and the band, like aren't there really. And like is that did that factor in at all to like, you know, your first like exposure to like June Payek, who like, I mean, I'd say they're emo violence. Like if we're gonna get back on that thing, not like correcting anyone for whatever reason, you know what I'm saying? But like you're saying we're talking about Envy and we're talking about like Fall of Ephrafa and then June Payek. Like, yeah, that's quite different, right? So like did any of that, like, was it that urgency where you're just like, I don't know what's going on right now, but yeah, this feels important?
Yes, honestly, I think you got it right. You were like, I don't know what this is, but whatever it is good, and I need to figure out. Like, it took me a while to like unpick why it appealed to me. I think, but you're right. It's how frenetic the music is. It's how authentic it is. It almost ruins other music for you as well, because nothing else quite captures it in the same way. There's bands that can sound aggressive, but it all sounds false. It all sounds fake in comparison. There's bands that try to sound tough, and it doesn't transpose itself in the same way compared to these, like you say, like the first bands that I heard. I was like, this is something totally different.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? Like, you know, there's no formula, and you know, if you the screamo that does follow a formula, or you know, like I said, like a really obviously trying to rip off this one band and doing it too successfully, that's when it stops being like interesting or appealing.
Yeah.
So like, yeah. I mean, you know, I like some hardcore and some metal and stuff, but like, I think what appeals about that less is the fact that there is kind of a formula to it to an extent. And, you know, some bands follow the formula really well and like it's cool. But yeah, most of the time it's like, well, this is like 5% different to this other band. And I've heard that other band, so I don't need to listen to both of them. If you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas like, yeah, Screamo's probably got like a bit more. I mean, you know, people who don't listen to Screamo probably say it all sounds the same. But like, I think what appeals is the fact that it is, yeah, it feels authentic and it all feels like fairly unique when it's done well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was like thinking about like, you know, it's like I mentioned before, I was like, yeah, take this with a grain of salt, you know, but a lot of like post-rock bands sound very similar to me, and like you said, it's like coming from the other way. It's like people who listen to post rock and they can, they can identify a band like having never even heard their song, probably, just like this is a new song by Explosions in the Sky, and you can tell it's Explosions in the Sky because you're dialed into that, but all screamo sounds identical to you. And it's like I like we played with so many Twinkle bands back in 2014 or whatever that like I don't even know, like you couldn't tell me, you could play like any of those bands and I'd just be like, is this band or is this band? Because I just don't even know. The only band that I like really thought was like good from that, and I don't even think, I think it's because they're not, that is like the Reptilian or like Two Nights, you know what I mean? Because they're like, they're like bands like Twinkle bands wanted to be those bands, but it's like that's the thing, right? It's because those bands weren't just that or whatever, but like,
I think there's like a bit more an edge to it, wasn't there? Especially like the Reptilian.
Yeah,
and like it's just like really unique. I think like the vocal style and like the delivery of it, like it wasn't just like trying to follow that twinkly blueprint.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's like it's really interesting when you like it's there's always a style of music that you sort of like don't like, or I'm assuming everybody has that one genre where it's like you all end up the mom that's like, this would be okay if it weren't for the screaming, except it's like with country, it's like the way that the country music vocalists are now. Like I could fuck with some of the music, like not the pop stuff necessarily, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like I could fuck with some of the music and then the man starts singing and I'm like, oh God, like no, but I don't feel that way about the stuff that was made like, like 40, 50 years ago or whatever, it's different. But I just everybody's got that one genre where it's just like, you become that person that's like, well, this would be good if it weren't for this. But
back when country music musicians were right-wing alcoholic scumbags as opposed to just right-wing scumbags. That's what it was really.
They were like they were proletariat, like union working, like, you know what I mean? They were like
they
were
town vans out taking codeine in a shack in the middle of nowhere somewhere. That was the real screamer. That was the real country.
But getting back to sort of like the band like timeline and stuff, y'all started like the first thing was 2016 and you've been releasing like 3 songs here, and then you had the split with Our Future is an Absolute Shadow. But this year was like, okay, now it's time for an LP. So what exactly was everyone's thought process where it's just like, okay, now it's time to do like the big thing?
I think it was just because we were supposed to tour with Plague Walker, weren't we? We were meant to go to Europe with Plague Walker in spring, summer of 2020. So obviously that didn't happen.
Right. Yeah.
For obvious reasons. So I think just part of taking that much time off from music because of circumstances we couldn't control. So like we didn't see each other for like best part of like 2.5 years or something because we all live at like opposite ends of the country. So for us all to get into a room is like quite a big deal. And then I think just because we had that gap, we're like, well, we kind of had like some songs we were working on. We've taken this time off. What's, another year or two to do something that's longer than 3 songs. So I think because the reason, well, it felt like we had like a bit of momentum going when we first started. So we did that first EP and then we did, like a couple of weeks around Europe, and then like the next year we put out another EP, and then we did like 5 weeks around Europe, and then I think if it wasn't for COVID, we'd probably just keep following that formula where just knock out enough songs to make it worth releasing something, and then just go on tour for a bit. But obviously, not being able to leave the house and not really being able to see each other, it just felt like, yeah, that sort of like momentum was gone a bit. So we thought, well, let's try taking our time and put out something that's longer than 10 minutes long.
Yeah.
That felt to me. I don't think we really discussed it, have we? It just sort of naturally happened.
Yeah, I don't think it was necessarily a conscious choice at first. I agree with you. I think it was just time that led to us having more songs. There's some songs on this release that are years old at this point. Not necessarily in the kind of, they were in their final shape years ago, but there's things that we kind of revived and changed parts or tweaked parts that we weren't happy with or wanted to kind of revisit and add a different spin on it to make it more kind of contemporary to other songs that we'd written. Honestly, I think when we were writing this stuff, it kind of felt like a bit of a last hurrah in a sense. I think the lack of momentum that we'd had, I was hesitant to think it would continue. I'm glad it has, and I think it's nice to kind of get some of that momentum back. So yeah, I think definitely making it kind of a worthwhile release was part of it. To an extent as well, it was the logistical issues of practicing obviously definitely feed into it, but we started growing further apart geographically from about 2018, 2019 as well. So it just got more and more difficult to practice, whereas we could maybe drive 2 hours to each other. Previously, we all started getting different jobs. We all started having kind of more demands on our free time. Well, I mean, real life got in the way, basically, as you get older, right? So yeah, the kind of the ability for us to just drop things and see each other for a weekend was more and more difficult to achieve because it started meaning taking time off work and all the rest of it. So I think that definitely impacted our ability to be as productive as we used to be, although I would still argue that we weren't hugely productive beforehand. But yeah, I think it manifested itself that way in that I almost saw this as kind of like the final release that we'd do, and then we'd maybe move on to do something else and draw a line under it. But then as time went on, as we got back together, I think more things started to surface that were kind of worth writing and worth playing. I started to get some more kind of enjoyment that there was momentum behind the band again, because I think we had struggled with that for a bit. I don't know whether you thought the same was or not.
Yeah, definitely. And as well, like we had like a couple of lineup changes since we last did anything. Like our original bassist Alan left the band after that Straka tour, probably because we just like bullied him the whole time. No, I think he just had enough of being in the band after 5 weeks in the band. But yeah, after that, we our friend Dom was going to play bass for us, and he came to one practice. And we're like, oh yeah, this was sick. And then at the end of the practice, he was like, oh yeah, my partner's pregnant, so I'm not going to be able to do the band. So that was like a slight speed bump. But yeah, now Luke started playing bass for us, and it kind of feels like quite fresh again because he's like a really good musician and pretty well put together, and he's got kind of like a lot of interesting ideas and stuff. So like he's not been like he's sort of joined the band after most of the songs were more or less written, but like it's just exciting having him playing with us, and I think it's giving us like a bit of a shot in the arm to like get things going again and just see what he can contribute to the band and all that stuff. And he's like super excited about the prospect of touring because he's not been he's not played like music live in years and years and years. So he's like, he's really, really excited to get in a van and let us bully him for 5 weeks. So, I think that's given us like a bit of momentum again, like a bit of a drive to, make the effort and drive the entire length of the country to set the stage practice room for a weekend.
Yeah. So like you mentioned that some of these songs were older and they just like took a little bit of like reworking and whatnot, but what about like the rest of the material? How was this being written now that you all are even further apart? Was it just like less less get together jam sessions, or were people sending each other like bits over email and whatnot to like reference and sort of learn, or like was some of this being written over the web as it or was it just like the times when you were able to get together, though they were few and far between, that's when you would work on filling out what would become the album?
I think. Go ahead, Michael.
Okay.
I was just going to say, it's like it's kind of a bit of both. Like Michael and Elliot like live quite close to each other, and they they seem quite love each other. So they tend to write like riffs and things, or like like basic ideas, and then when we all get together, we sort of like flesh it out and be like, this riff's kind of cool. Don't know if it goes into that, but maybe we could like shuffle this around, or like we could play this bit for longer, or 9 times out of 10, what if we just did the same thing but it was really slow and heavy? What if we just made it harder? So it's kind of a mix of both, really. But yeah, we don't. I wouldn't say we have like fully formed songs ready to go when we like get together. It's more just like a sketch or like an outline of like riffs or like different parts, and then we just spend like hours trying to cobble it all together and try and make it flow.
Yeah, I think we normally come up with so Elliot can play instruments as well. We're in bands together aside of that, so he's got the ability to write music with me, which is really helpful actually, beyond just doing vocals. And he comes up with a lot of riffs, even like the songs where the majority of the music is his riffs, and then I take it and kind of put my own little slant on it, where if there's things that he would just play differently to me, that when I'm learning it, it's just kind of like it's natural for me to play it in a slightly different way, or I'm like, what about this note instead of that note, and all that. So there's a bit of kind of fine tuning of riffs beforehand. I would say we come maybe 60 to 80% of a song, or we've got 2 halves of a song and we don't really know the full extent, so we kind of just work through those in a practice. I think one of the interesting things from my perspective as well is Loz doesn't always necessarily play the drums in the same way that I hear them in my head when I'm writing the music, which is always an interesting change, because it's like some riffs totally have a different feel, and there's somewhere I'm maybe a bit more kind of, I think it would sound better if we do drums like this, or we can try them a few different ways and see what sounds best. But then there's some others where it's like, it's nice just to have that change happen organically when you do finally come together and practice and see how it all fits together and how the drums work, and you're like, oh, actually it's really cool playing it this way. I really like that. That works so much better than what I heard. And of says any kind of just tweaks to someone doesn't like part of a riff, so we change it, or we add a bit of something else in to give it a bit more of a dynamic shift between parts and things like that. So yeah, there's definitely an aspect where it just has to happen when we're in a room together, but it is always nice to see how other people have interpreted what we've done, because we've normally sent the riffs in advance as well to just kind of get the okay that people aren't going to hate it and we've wasted a drive to try and write something that no one even likes.
I think that y'all are talking about a lot more distance and whatnot than this, but yeah, I was in a band when I first moved to Indiana where like we would practice in Dayton, Ohio, and so it's like 3 hours, and so it's like I really felt like it was like, well, I've got to have something that's pretty much ready to be finished, or else it feels like a waste, of that 6 hour round trip or whatever. But I mean, you don't just assume that like at this point that whatever you bring is gonna have a blast beat over it. Like that's not. You
Sometimes
just
it's a deep.
oh, true, yeah.
Sometimes it's both.
So sometimes
Yeah.
a little bit of both. A D
That's
beat
just
with
the ratio that's surprising.
yeah, yeah. I yeah. When you have like the group of songs and you've set the recording date, is there still like is there still stuff being worked out? Like were you when you went to the studio, was everything pretty much nailed down, or was that still a bit more experimenting and fine tuning to do once you're at that point?
It's mostly like more or less there, but like Elliot, who does vocals, like he has like his own practice room that he records bands in anyway. So like with the practice room is the studio, which is kind of helpful. So like if we're
Oh,
not
okay.
100% there, we can still like work on stuff without feeling like we're on the clock or anything like that. But I think as well, like it's when you're actually there, like trying to play it really precisely, it kind of feels different anyway. So like with Katie as well, like we tend to before we record, just like go through things like a bunch of times and like maybe do it unplugged or whatever to just make sure that things are super tight, which I think does kind of lead to things changing at the last minute. But yeah, I think generally like most of the songs on this record at least were like pretty much ready and good to go before we started recording, weren't they? Or have I just totally made that up?
I think from the drum perspective, that's definitely true because you can only be here for the drums. Like that's the take. Like that weekend that we set to record is that we can't just get you back in the studio because it's so difficult for us to set it up in an identical fashion and get you all the way back up here. It's not going to happen. So yeah, I think definitely for the drums, we've kind of got the songs nailed down, and then when we're happy with the take, that's it. I normally do a guide guitar track along with the drums, so we've got something to work to. And then, yeah, I think for the most part, the guitar's maybe 95% done. The things that we do is like listening back in the cold light of day where there's two guitar parts and we say, oh, actually that note clashes, let's change this. I think for this particular release, a lot of the kind of the time investment in the studio was spent on kind of ironing out second guitar parts and working out the vocals as well, because they're the sort of last things that fit into place. I think, again, it would be nice if we could write all the guitar parts organically together at the same time, but it's just not going to happen for a band like us. So having that ability to play bits back and do new takes over again, and we say, okay, well, try this, or how about we change the rhythm of this part slightly, getting that sort of freedom to do it in a recording space rather than a practice space is really valuable. So yeah, I would say that the songs aren't 100% finished when we go into the studio. Again, we also have the benefit of our practice space being the recording space, so
Yeah.
we have the luxury of that time to do so.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I personally don't. I don't. I don't know that anybody really like is at that point where it's like 100% of it is like exactly the way, like when you go to record. Like I think that there's always that degree of spontaneous like imagination that happens when, like you said, when you're listening to it back for the first time, when it's really clear and you're almost an observer rather than a participant, and you're like, that light bulb goes off where you're just like, what if we tried that there? I mean, even probably in the most like rehearsed band that I had ever been a part of, where it was like, there's instances like on an album where like I just did this vocal take like way different than I had literally ever done it, and it went down on tape that way, and I'm like, how did that not ever happen before that point? Like, so I don't know. I think that part is like a lot of people love playing shows and hate recording, and a lot of people are vice versa. Well, I mean, I think less people are the other way. You know, I think more people love playing shows and hate recording than like hate playing shows. Although I have, you know, out of 200
it's so easy to
episodes,
expose all your flaws that way.
yeah, it's but it's just like, yeah, that to me, that's why I really love recording, is because you do get to have that, you know, that singular experience of like, even if you recorded demos of this or whatever, you know, sometimes you just get that, like when everything is coming back to you, the way, you know, you are now objective in a way to it that you have not been up until that point, and you're like, oh shit, like let's try this, you know. I think that's a lot of fun. Do you all record, like when you get together and put these 3 songs together, do you record like demo versions of them then so you don't forget? Or like, is it just like, you know, because I know, Loz, you had that like, you had that recorder that you had taken on the tour with us a couple times. So is there just like a recording happening at all of the practices where it's just like, okay, and I'll send you these files so we don't like forget the songs?
Yeah, pretty much. Like when we're like, yeah, when we've got something, so even if it's just like a riff or like a little section, we'll tend to record it, just because, yeah, like it'll be months before we get together again. So the chances of remembering it exactly how we, you know, spent hours working on it is pretty slim.
Yeah.
And yeah, luckily
Recordings we don't do it anyway, we just forget.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't help that Tom and I drink as much beer as we can at every practice. But,
Pivomania.
yeah, and to be fair, actually, Elliot and Luke as well. Just Michael's the sensible one. But yeah, like it's really, really handy having. I mean, Elliot, like basically, yeah, the practice room is set up to record. So like, even if it's just like a really quick, just like chuck a couple of mics up, it normally sounds like way better than just like a crappy practice room demo. And Luke as well, who's like started playing bass for us, is like music like recording genius. So like yeah, so it makes life a lot easier that they're just like, right, we can set this up in half an hour, and then we've got like some decent sounding demos to refer to when we get back together in a few months' time.
Yeah. Has there ever been anything that you all were stumbling on and just like holy shit, this is amazing, that just like didn't work out?
Or like just like some ideas that are like, oh, this is great, but we just couldn't put it together.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely, yeah.
Post
like
your L's.
Yeah. There's definitely, like, we've probably still got some riffs that, like, next time we try and write something, like, oh yeah, how the fuck do we make this work? Because it's like, yeah, in isolation, it's like, oh, this is sick, and then it's like, well, we can't figure out how to start or end it, so we'll put it on the back burner.
Yeah. There is one riff that is the black metal riff, as it's known, and it has existed between, I think, 3 bands now, all of which Elliot's been in, and we've tried numerous times to make a song work around it, but I think it's such a departure from what Komarov usually sound like. It's so difficult to work into any of our songs, and we've tried on multiple occasions over the years, and it still never happened. So I think that's the one. It still exists today, unrecorded, unused in any bands, despite the fact we even tried to use it in a kind of black metal-y, chorusy, 80s influenced hardcore band. Still wasn't black, like the band itself wasn't black metal enough to use the riff. So I think I'm resigned to having to start an entirely black metal band at some point just to be able to use that riff.
It's one song, and you got to write like 19 more minutes around it and just make like this one
a magnum opus.
Yeah, just like one band, like a band with one song, just like built around this, call it a day. And I always see like people saying like stuff like, yeah, more bands need to just do one cool thing and then like disappear. And I'm like, yeah, well, I don't know how to shut up though. Like, I just don't. Like, I stumble onto something that I like, and I'm like, ooh, I want to do that again. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it ain't
I
broke,
put too much effort into this. Why would I stop doing it now? It's just getting good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's weird. Like, I have a whole folder of that stuff where it's just like, oh, I love this, but I can't. Yeah, I don't know what to do with it. And like, there's one song that Komarov released in particular, and I don't know if I ever said the name of it or whatever, and so I won't now. But like, there's one song where like the beginning of it, like I was like so pumped on it. I'm like, this is fucking great, and I wrote like basically the second 2/3 of the song like 15 different ways or something, and didn't really like any of them. And finally I was just like, oh, I know why I like the beginning of this song so much, and it's because I totally ripped off this other band that I love. And I know why I can't finish the song, because like no matter what I do, it's, unless I rip off the rest of that band's song, like it's not going to sound right? So like I was just like, I should just pick one of these 15 ways to end the song, and that's what I did. I was just like,
just pull one out of the hat.
Yeah, I was just like, whichever one of these ones sounds the best, and I did it. And
the least worst.
Yeah. Really, we released the song, and you know, just like any other of our songs, like one person was like, this is my favorite song of y'all's. Like, there's so many instances where it's like somebody is like, this is my favorite song, and I'm like, really? Like, I'm not iffy on any of our songs. Like, I'm not like, oh, I don't like that song, like why would I release it? So it's not that. It's just like, you like as a member of the band, like each one of your bands, like you get some idea, like people are gonna love these songs, but you love them all, right? Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, but
yeah, definitely.
You sort of
like
just,
the ones that you think people are going to go wild for, like the ones that kind of get forgotten, and vice versa.
every you know, every so often it's somebody's just like, this is my favorite song of y'all's, and I'm like, what? Like, that's so weird. But I mean, you know, bless you for, you know, loving the B-sides and the, you know, the one-off cuts and stuff like that, you know. Like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's certainly bands that I'm into where I feel like, yeah, I like their weirdest song, you know, or whatever. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so, Sonic Youth, like, it's like they've got like that one like emo song, and I'm like, I can't think of the name of it right now, but I'm like, that's my favorite Sonic Youth song, and people are like, that doesn't sound like them, and I'm like, well, I don't know, you know.
Maybe that's why you like it.
Yeah, I guess, you know, but yeah, so, you know, the last time that y'all tried to go out on a tour, Loz, I think we talked about this on the last time that you were on the show. The last time that y'all tried to go on tour, y'all got together, you did your practice, then you went to the pub, and everybody came down with the nasty. So this time when you all got together, did you all play it safe? You're like, okay, no going to the pub, or did you just throw caution to the wind, you went to the pub again, but it all worked out this time?
Well, Luke got really sick. So it wasn't COVID, so it was okay.
Oh, this time?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Like, I think we're just cursed. Like, he had like some like throat infection or something, so it's like, yeah, pretty lucky he doesn't do vocals. But yeah, like the first night in Glasgow, he like woke up in the middle of the night with like a fever, just like throwing up everywhere. And then, ended up having to had to go to the hospital on like a Saturday night in Newcastle to get it looked at. So we've not quite escaped the Komarov curse yet, I don't think.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh my goodness. I didn't know.
We were all full of cold as well. But I mean, I tested and was negative. It was like, I think in a way it was kind of nice to get the illnesses out of the way beforehand. It always felt good to get ill when we weren't on set.
Did they just give Luke like a bunch, here's some antibiotics, and then y'all just roughed it out, or?
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I mean, it was only like a weekender. Like, we only had three shows,
Oh, okay.
and yeah, but luckily got ill on the first one, so that was cool. But like after he got the antibiotics and stuff, he was like pretty fine, despite having not slept for like 3 days.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think it was just a bit of peace of mind with that as well, right?
yeah.
And also the fact that we knew that it wasn't like infectious and there's no like moral quandaries about how we get around, how we work out getting Luke home and safe, how we keep doing shows or anything like that. So I think it simplified everything to know that he was kind of safe and as well as could be.
Yeah.
And then we kind of carry on.
Yeah. So even
I think as
after
well-
all that,
sorry, go
like
ahead.
Luke is like, when can we do this again?
Yeah,
Pretty much,
yeah.
yeah.
He's excited.
Yeah. I mean, that's when you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
like,
that's
it's working. You're like, all right. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like a good mix at the minute.
Yeah. So what is as far as like, you know, next for you all? Like, obviously, like, just released the album, and your time, you know, all of y'all's time is really hard to come by. Are you trying to make plans to like do more like touring right now, or is it sort of like everybody's like fire with the band's got you all wanting to write some more songs, or like what's coming up for you all as a band?
So yeah, we got some more shows coming up. Like we're like with the shows we just played were just in like the north of the UK. So we did like Scotland and then like the north. And then in June we're playing some gigs with Reeve, who are like members of Bull of Ephrata and stuff like that. Just doing like a couple of shows in the south of England. And then in October, I think we're going to try and do like a little run just around Europe. Just like a like a long weekend kind of thing. And yeah, that's pretty much all we've got booked at the minute. But I think probably the plan is, just like spend the next year or two just like trying to book some fun shorter tours and just see what happens. But yeah, I think none of us are really keen to like get in a van for 5 weeks again, I don't think. So yeah, we're not going to do like over a month around Europe with a Stracker anytime soon. But I think just like we've all got commitments and stuff now, so I think it's just like shorter tours, but maybe more frequently is probably the plan.
And that was my conversation with Michael and Loz from Komarov. Thank you both so much for taking the time to chat with me. I love you, Loz. Thanks to all of y'all for listening wherever you are as well. If you got a minute, rate and review the show, and let people know that you're into it. Until next time, take care and do good things.